Good morning, my ice cream mommies and poppies, my scoopies and my softies. We have episode 5 today of the ONLYGRAMS podcast. And our first segment is coffee. This morning we are brewing a wonderful single origin Ethiopian from Black and White Coffee Roasters. It's an Ethiopian. Did I mention it was washed? It's washed. And the flavor notes are out of this world. Even when brewing it, I could actually smell this like watermelon passion. I wouldn't say I was picking out watermelon or passion fruit, but I was getting this like sour tingle in my jowls from that like acidity, even when it was brewing, much less drinking it. Let's invite Sunday up to the bench. Sunday, come here, sweetie. Come here. Good girl. Come on. Come on. Good girl. Have a seat. Come join us. Anything that Black and White Roasters makes is really, really fantastic. I should say roasts. So I will flash. Well, I guess while we're doing this, I shot some B-roll of me brewing the coffee. We're using the fellow Aiden Smart Brewer connected little coffee robot. I do enjoy that coffee machine a lot. It really does take the romance out of making coffee, but man, tell you what, when it's like automatic like that and it does all the figuring for you, it's kind of nice. I will say that this coffee smelled better than it tastes. But usually things open up as it cools off. All right, so let's get into segment. Well, let me talk about what I did this weekend. I got a great gift for my birthday. We got a gift certificate to the DeBruce Hotel up in Western Catskills. Okay, that was in Livingston Manor. I've been there before. And it is a like small little hotel with an incredible restaurant, like tasting menu, like very conceptual and esoteric. Like for example, we had tomato. It just said tomato on the menu, and we got a tomato gelée, which was like a tomato soup gel that in the shape of a tomato, and inside of it was some house-cured farmer's cheese. It had a caper dirt underneath and a chive tuile on top to like make the little stem. It was like a reconstructed tomato. One of those sorts of restaurants. Now I'm going to tell you, it is not cheap. It is shockingly expensive, but we got it as a gift, and I will say if you're looking to treat yourself, there's more than just the hotel and the food. Going up to the Western Catskills, especially this time of year, is gorgeous. We went up a little bit late to see like really the full change in foliage, but half of the mountains up there, it's actually not a mountain, it is a plateau. Most people think the Catskills are mountains. They are not, they are plateaus. But it's just gorgeous up there, and it's like nice getaway from the city. The town is very nice. It's got a lot of, I don't want to say yuppie, but you know, people from New York have now come up to Livingston Manor and made some very nice shops and restaurants and just like a really great place to be. And it's going through, I would say, like a Renaissance phase. And it's been going through that. It's not like it's just happening now, but it's awesome. It's got a great market up there with a bunch of really cool provisions, and honestly, I'm not going to lie, like I got 2 of the best Americanos I've had in a very long time. Kind of blew my mind. So all around a really great trip. We headed out on Friday, got up there Friday night. We ate at the restaurant a la carte. Amazing burger. Like you would travel up there and maybe spend that amount of money just to have this burger. It was incredible. Then we woke up and had the breakfast, headed into town. We spent all day in town. I ended up talking to a bunch of store owners, just talking about like, what it's like to do business. I don't know. It was just crazy how all these conversations evolved. And then we headed back to do the full tasting menu at the DeBruce, stayed the night, had breakfast again, and headed back to Philly. Now, my intention was to film out there because it was picturesque. It would have been great for this. Much better than this scenery right here. But I left the memory card on my desk. I can't film without the memory card. Big bummer. So here we are in my office. We will get into segment number 2, which is the market report. Now, the market report's going to be a little bit different this episode just because it's been about 3 weeks since we last checked in. And it's actually a better snapshot of what's going on at the shops with respect to seasonality because it's like really starting to happen now. It's our off-season slide. So let's dig into that. Put my coffee down. I unpacked my camera bag and load up this side table with all of my lenses. Here we go. All right, let's get into the notes. Episode 5. So let's look globally. So October is down 14% on sales versus September and down 10% on transactions. September was like a really hot month for us. So to see that, October is missing by 14% on sales and 10% on transactions really is an indicator that we're starting to see our off-season slide. To be expected, but we've had some really great weeks in October just due to the weather being so nice. So it's really hanging on. And coming off of such a hot September, really only being down 14% isn't monumental. I mean, it's an indicator of a shift in what's going on, but that's still pretty good revenue. If we hang on to that through November or even something close, we're going to be in really good shape. Now it's being a seasonal business, it's always like really scary when you start hitting your seasonal cliff. But the further you can push that out, the better things are, obviously. So, over the past few weeks, it's been consistently down, but I'm not terribly worried about it. This past period, I guess it would be a Sunday to Saturday look. I think it was like the 20th through the 26th is what the period was. It ranks 26 out of the 44 weeks so far in the year. So, still kind of middle of the road. Soft serve is still the top category at 48% more than scoops. Rittenhouse did 2.5 times the amount of business as Fishtown. So this is all still kind of tracking with our trends. Nothing really jumps out at me other than, October being down. So let's move into segment number 3. Fun facts. Fun facts are things that I have picked up mostly from podcasts. And I listened to a very interesting podcast about billionaires and how they avoid tax. I kind of knew how this worked, but when it was illustrated to me in such specific detail, it made like a lot more sense. But essentially what happens, the Bezoses of the world and major CEOs and owners of publicly traded companies, what they do is they take like $1 in salary because, salary is taxable. And they get all their compensation from stock because stocks are not a taxable event if you hold on to them. If you sell them and realize the gains, then they are taxable. But what they do is they just take most of their compensation in stocks, they hold on to it, and then they go to a bank and they get a loan against their stock. So their stock is their collateral and they don't have to cash it out and realize those gains, which would be a taxable event. They can just get some very friendly bank to give them a note, millions of dollars at a very low interest rate because it's pretty secure. It's backed by a very liquid asset, which would be the stock. And that financial vehicle of getting a loan is not taxable. So this is how they're able to avoid tax. And essentially, these loans are written basically into infinity. There really is no term on them. And what would pay them back if that CEO died would be the CEO's estate. So I find that very interesting. I'll put a link to that episode, that podcast, in the description so you can listen to it yourself. It goes into a lot more detail, but that's really the gist of it. Another thing that I learned is Toyota Motor Company. They invented just-in-time inventory. I learned that on 99% Invisible. But the way they manufactured cars is they only ordered and produced for what they needed to meet the current market demand. And that was a major shift in how manufacturing was done prior, where they would just do these huge runs, huge buys of materials. And unfortunately, sometimes these companies would be sitting on inventory and it'd be burning a hole in their pocket. So that's a really interesting podcast, but I just thought, and this also bleeds over into other industries. Grocery, for example, is another industry that's heavily into just-in-time inventory. But kind of cool that Toyota invented that. And also, Toyota provided this blueprint for free for everybody else. They wrote the book on it, and instead of hoarding it for themselves, or I don't know if you could license it, but monetizing in some way, no, they didn't do that. They gave it away for free, and I think that's awesome. I think Toyota is a really interesting company. Side note, I like how they're not like going all in on EV and they're still sticking to hybrid. I do appreciate that. I think that is the way to go. But that's that is a different discussion for a different time. And last thing I want to bring up is my own theory of buy and modify. So this all stemmed from when we order on Uline. If you order enough, your order value is X, you can pick a free gift from their catalog. And the gifts get better as you spend more money. Well, I got these Coleman jackets. They are a shearling lined flannel jacket. They're awesome. They are very warm. They fit great, and just throw them on, get them dirty, whatever, and it was free. The major problem was it was a button enclosure, and getting in and out of a button enclosure, major pain in the ass. Needed a zipper, and it didn't come with it. So instead of going out and buying something else, I modified it. Did I say buy and modify? What I meant to say is modify, don't buy. Get something that you already have and tailor it to what you want. It's less on the whole fast fashion kind of consumerism. Find something that you already have and just tweak it, because there's a lot of people out there that can modify things for your needs, or you can modify it yourself. And that's what I'm about these days. I'm about taking things that I already have and making them work for me. For example, that Coleman jacket, I had some zippers put in. Shout out to Franklin and Poe in Fishtown who did that work for me. All right, so now we can just dive right into the last segment, which is questions. These are some really good questions this week. I think maybe taking a few weeks off allowed things to kind of marinate and breathe a little bit. Going week to week might be too short of a time cycle. Anyway, some really great questions. First question. Okay, hold on. We got to shout people out. Right, so our first question is from E. Bellameme. What is your flavor profile creation process? I think it might disappoint you to find out how little goes into flavor profile creation process. We don't really, when we start at the top of the funnel, seasonality is kind of considered. Like, I'm not trying to run pumpkin in the middle of the summer, but that's not really what dictates how we come up with flavors or how I come up with flavors. I have basically built a flavor bank in my head over the past 6 years of making ice cream that it just kind of like comes naturally. I would say in the beginning part of my ice cream career, there was probably a little bit more thought into selecting flavors that I knew would be of popular appeal. I mean, I knew my style was going to be more down the middle and not esoteric flavors, not really chefy flavors, but really selling the hits. So that was kind of creating my style of ice cream, and then finding flavor profiles that fit into that style. And then from there, selling them and seeing what sells really well over time has kind of just put this general knowledge bank into my head that I don't really have to think about it. So when Max calls me up on a Monday and says we're going to be doing a flavor change on soft serve, what do you want to do? It's pretty easy for me to pick, and I choose things that we haven't done in 2 to 3 weeks, just to kind of make sure that flavors are not backing up against each other that are similar. So if we're running fruits 1 week, maybe I want to give that a couple more weeks until we run fruit again. And then it's always about finding complementary flavors when we're doing soft serve, because on the same machine, we want to have a nice complementary twist. That is really just the extent of it. And I would say one of the skills that I have, or one of the skills that I've developed over the years, is just the ability to have a bank of flavor profiles to go to that are already tried over the past few years, and being able to essentially pull them out of a hat at random. That is really the extent of it. Hey guys, it's me in the edit. I was thinking about this question, and I think I really shortchanged it. There is a lot I can say about our flavor creation process. I don't know why in the moment I was not thinking deep enough about it, but our pints follow a formula of base, crunch, swirl. So we always hit you with a familiar base flavor, a crunch or some sort of textural component that creates contrast or something to chew through, like vanilla crunchies or cookie dough or brownies, and then a swirl to provide both a visual contrast, because our pint containers are clear, but it's also an opportunity for us to really punch flavors through, intense flavors. I'll give you an example. Fruit ice cream, we don't use flavorings or extracts, we use fruit puree. That fruit flavor can get a little bit muted when you add it to a 16% butterfat ice cream base. It's nice, but it's a very round flavor. It's a fruit cream. So in order to really pop that fruit flavor through, we use the swirl, which is a fruit jam that we really turn up the acid on. We'll either add citric acid or malic acid or lemon juice to create a really intense fruit flavor. And that's a great way to really create moments of highlight in a pint of ice cream. Now you can do that with fudge and caramel, but it's not going to be as intense of a flavor. That's just an opportunity to get like another inclusion in there. Another thing that we like to do is make sure that the pints are balanced, both from a sweet and a savory perspective. So if we have a pint that has a lot of sweet things going on, I always want to make sure that we introduce a little bit more salt into the base, just to kind of bring those levels to balance those levels. That way it's not just like this huge sugar bomb. Or if there's like something sweet going on the base, and we'll make sure that there's an inclusion that has a savory component or something salty like pretzels, for example. I look at our pints and our flavor profiles as an equalizer, as a sound equalizer, as a soundboard. We have all these little levels that we can play with, and it's all about creating a really nice curve. We don't ever want it to be flat. We always want it to be multimodal and dynamic, and we adjust the different levels in the pint through bases and crunches and swirls and salt, so that it's a really unique and dynamic eating experience. Now, the last thing, in our pints, or in all of our ice creams, we use very familiar flavors, chocolate, vanilla, salted caramel, coffee. That is not a very large palette to work with. So what I like to do is drill down into a flavor. Chocolate, for example. In America, a typical ice cream maker will just take cocoa powder and they'll add it to some dairy, and that's chocolate ice cream for them. But I find that to be a very, it's not a very intense flavor. It kind of tastes like chocolate milk or, like Nesquik. But to get something a little bit more intense, we look at what they do in Italy for gelato. They use a cocoa paste. It's much more intense. It's much more rich, and it actually provides a unique texture to the ice cream. It actually makes it a little bit chewier, a little bit more silky. It's not as dry. So that's one way you could take something like chocolate and make it a little bit more interesting. Another thing you could do is if you did want to work with a really nice cocoa powder, you could roast that cocoa powder. Roasting is a way to take something like chocolate or bananas or strawberries and change them, but still keep them familiar. It's a wonderful opportunity. We do this all the time. So if you want to make banana ice cream, don't use flavorings or extracts. Use banana puree, but go one step further. Get some like banana bread ready bananas and roast them and do a caramelized banana. Caramelizing is a really great way to get sugars to intensify, to get flavors to intensify, but you're still hitting on very familiar notes. So hopefully that adds a little bit more context to this question. It's a great question, and I was in the edit and I'm like, you know what? I really just whiffed on it. So here I am to give you a little bit more. All right, back to the video. LMW215, favorite hikes you've done in PA. So I haven't hiked a ton in Pennsylvania. In fact, I really just started my hiking hobby in the past year, so I haven't done a ton. I will say the Wissahickon is easy and close, but I tried to call up trails on All Trails and trailheads were closed or the routes didn't really make sense. So that kind of turned me off a little bit, but if you can find some nice trails that are verified, I would say the Wiss is pretty nice, just due to how local it is. I have gone further out into some of our state forests and done hikes. They have been phenomenal. Some have been extremely challenging, like the one I did, 3 or 4 weeks ago. But I would recommend kind of searching on All Trails for some trails. I'm currently using an app called ONX, O-N-X, Backcountry, to find trails. But I haven't done a ton to really tell you which one's my favorite. It's only been a few. I've hiked out in the Catskills a bunch, but that's not Pennsylvania. Maggie.all. How did you find your wholesale supplier for the pistachios in Italy? Super easy. Just some Googling. I essentially wanted farms. I wanted to go direct. I didn't want to have some sort of distributor in between. I wanted to go directly to the farms. So I just started typing in, and I also knew that the best pistachios are from Italy. They're grown in Bronte. So I searched for farms in Bronte, Italy, in Sicily to find farms, and then I just started emailing them. The Sunny Point. How about an ice cream spot with a ton of seating for winter? Yeah, that would be awesome. Now, the issue is I don't really want a third shop, and I wouldn't want to create a shop for a particular experience in a particular season, because you have to pay rent all year long, and finding a ice cream spot that has a lot of seating means there's a lot of square footage, and you lease per square foot, so it gets expensive. All of these things that I want to do, and I think you guys might like, especially 5-6 years in, cost a lot of money. And I can really only do this work in the off season, but that's also when cash is really tight. So I'm in a bit of a tough spot, especially with respect to renovating our shops, which I know is a question coming up, so I'll touch on that. But I think even if we did have a big space that had a lot of seating, I'm not sure people would come out and get ice cream and sit there in the wintertime. I think winter really changes how people shop and how they get places and also what they're eating. I know people eat ice cream all year long, but typically they're working off of pints that they have in their freezer. It's not really a natural thought process to go out, brave the cold, go to a scoop shop, get a scoop of ice cream, and sit down. What you'd really have to do if you wanted to make that work, I think, is to create a whole dessert experience so that if somebody is going out and having dinner, maybe they're coming to your spot to sit down to have dessert. But you would need a whole dessert program, something that I've thought about, something that I just can't take on myself. There's a lot of things I want to do, and I would have to end up doing them myself, and that's just not scalable, and it's something I'm not interested in doing. I'm interested in like running this business at the top and delegating down. And finding a pastry chef to come up with a dessert menu, again, another expense for something that I think might have low sell-through. So, it's definitely an interesting question, but unfortunately, I think that's going to be a little bit limited by just how much it would cost, and I don't know if the ROI would be there. And I am not in a position to explore that right now. This was that question I was talking about. So from Andrew Klein 4, why don't you focus on pint sales and store build out? A lot of people have been asking, like, why don't we focus on pints? But I look in that freezer and there's 5 to 10 flavors of pints in there. We do pints, and we have been doing them. It's the time is split amongst all the other things that we have to make for the shops, and we don't really highlight the production process of it, but we're always making pints. And in fact, we have another 6 to 8 pints coming out over the next couple weeks. But for your second question, why don't we focus on store build out? Again, I mentioned if I'm going to renovate the shops that I already have, then I have to do it in the off season. I can't close the shops to do the renovations during the high season. And I don't want to be spending a bunch of money in the off season when I don't know how long that off season is going to last, how tight cash is going to be. So it's a really difficult predicament. The other thing is, Rittenhouse, as I found out, is a really terrible layout for a high volume ice cream shop. So I don't want to pour a bunch of money, and I've gotten quotes. In fact, I've done 2 store layouts with architects. One I had completed for Rittenhouse. That cost me like 15 grand just for blueprints. And I probably spent like 30 grand to do Burke's over in Fishtown, that location that never took off. So I've dedicated a lot of time and money to doing build outs, but it just hasn't been the right time, and the locations haven't been awesome. So back to what I was saying, I don't want to pour a bunch of money into Rittenhouse rather that doesn't have a good layout. And I'm kind of one of those people. I don't want to just do like little tiny things. If I'm going to do anything, I want to do the whole space. So I think what it might look like is we're going to hold on. We've got 2 more years left on that lease. I'm going to see what else is available so that maybe Rittenhouse can be in a different location, in a better space, and then we can start day one. We can open day one with a shop that's already been built out. Fishtown is a different situation because the lease is really good and the space is really big, and that might be something that could be a good candidate for staying there long term. I do like that space a lot, and then we can maybe close down for a few months in the off season when we're pretty sure cash is going to be okay. Lean on Rittenhouse to be open while we're doing the renovations in Fishtown. But I hear you, man. I want nothing more than my shops to look like Ame or something nuts. Like, I'll show you. I have Pinterest boards full of inspiration to do these shops. It's the last piece. I go into my shops, I'm like, God, they don't have a vibe, and they don't match how good the product is. So I hear you. I think it's a really big hole in what we have going on at 1-900. It pains me. You talk to anybody who knows me, I'm always talking about how I don't like how the shops look, but unfortunately it's a money thing, and it's also like, do I really want to throw that much money into a space that's not great? So, great question. You're heard, and I agree. It's we'll work on it. Haley Lovegoat, why does the custard taste like egg? So custard is a specific thing. It's a specific food. What makes custard custard is egg yolks. So what you're tasting is what makes custard custard, and that is eggs. A lot of people think, especially if you go down to the Jersey Shore, that custard is just that soft ice cream that comes out of a machine, and it's not. Custard is a very specific thing, and in the United States, it has to have at least 1.4% egg yolks by weight in order for it to be called custard. And to that end, how you cook your base will determine how eggy that flavor profile is. If you are going to be pasteurizing on the lower end of temperature, say like in the 149 to 150 range for a longer period of time, you're gonna get less egg flavor because you're not going to be denaturing the proteins as much. And when you denature proteins, you're breaking open these sulfur compounds that release that eggy flavor. It's what makes eggs taste like eggs, the sulfur compounds. Just think about like when you've had a hard-boiled egg and it doesn't smell great. Those are sulfur compounds. When you cook when you cook custard at a higher temperature, you're breaking up more of these molecules and you're getting more of an eggy sulfur flavor release, and that is where our formulation lives. First of all, we do 2.5% egg yolk by weight, so it's nearly 75% more egg yolk. So that's one. And two, we're cooking at 165 degrees, which is a higher temperature. It's going to release more sulfur compounds, so it's going to be eggier. Good question. Pipe Dope wants to know, do you meditate and self-reflect often? I don't meditate, but I literally spend every single day with internal thought, talking to myself. I reflect often and constantly. So when I'm driving out to the farm or, I'm doing some monotonous task, I'm just like mulling over in my head, my day, what I want to do, why the shops look like shit, how do we improve the soft serve, what is the next formulation? Like my head is constantly talking. Meditation I don't do. I think it would be interesting, but I don't need it. The reason why I don't need it is because I don't need to quiet the chatter in my head. It's not overwhelming to me. It doesn't impact me negatively, and all that talking that's happening in my head and the conversations that I have with myself are very productive. They aid in my creative process. They help me come up with things. So it's like, it's not that I don't like have a problem, but I don't need to meditate. I need that chatter going on in my head. When I go on hikes, when I go out with Sunday, I'm taking that time and that space to allow these conversations to bloom and to happen. Next question. Again from Pipe Dope. What life event changed who you were forever? There was no one. I didn't have like some major life event that changed me. I am a constant work in progress. I allow for evolution. I love change. I have a very high tolerance for risk. So I'm constantly changing. I think who I am naturally has never changed. Just being a curious, creative person is a common thread my entire life. It's just core to who I am. And I've never really changed who I am. I've kind of tweaked the levels. Like if you look at my personality as an equalizer on a receiver or a music deck, I've tweaked some things down that have been peaking, and I've brought some things up that have been lacking. But the way I look at my life is just dialing in, moving these things and using self-reflecting to say what needs to come up, what should come down. But I haven't had one major significant life event that changed the course of my life. I've kind of just been on this path for a long time. Good question. Jewelry Momrade. I hope I'm saying these screen names right. When modifying or fixing, do you learn electric skills to start, or do you look up manuals for each machine? When I fix things, the first thing I do is I just take a look at it. I, jiggle things around. I'm listening for things, because a lot of the machines I work with are mechanical and they're not totally driven by computers. So a lot of times the problems are physically obvious. So I usually start there just to kind of get a general sense of what's going on with the machine, what the problem is or where it might be. From there, once I've isolated a potential source of the issue, then I go to the internet, then I go to YouTube, then I'm Googling for manuals. And a lot of the things that I have problems with, some other genius has figured out and created a whole YouTube video for. So I watch the YouTube video or break out the manual and then go back to my machine and fix it. In doing that, I've learned how to do basic electrical things. So I remember a long time ago, I had to figure out if this outlet was working. And so I was like, how do you figure this out? And they're like, buy a multimeter. So a long time ago, I went on Amazon, I bought a multimeter, and I learned exactly the steps on that multimeter to test the outlet. Now that multimeter does a lot of other things, and over the years, I've learned how to use those functions on a multimeter, and it's just kind of been problem, figure out how to solve it. And in doing that, I've created a holistic knowledge bank around, fixing things. I wouldn't say my electrical skills are, don't send me into an electrical problem without the internet is basically what I'm saying. I follow directions very well, but I don't have a professional understanding of electricity. Robert Gomez. How steep is the learning curve to go from making ice cream for the first time to opening a shop? Well, that is as steep as you want to make it. And the reason why I say that is because my path was very organic and slow. I started making ice cream and I served it to my guests at the underground restaurant. And then I made pints and sold them pints for Thanksgiving. And I marketed directly to my email list that I had. And then I started making more flavors. And then I introduced that to social media and then started making ice cream sales to people out of my apartment. And then I bought more serious equipment and rented a commissary space. And then I outgrew the commissary space and subleased from another ice cream company. They went out of business. Then I had to take over. And then I went from selling pints out of my apartment to then asking other businesses if I could put freezers in there with self-checkout. So it was a very step-by-step, slow, organic process that really smoothed out that learning curve. I will tell you there is a huge difference in selling onesie-twosie ice cream pints to entering full retail, because it is a completely different beast. The amount of people that come to your shop which present different problems, different expectations, people who don't know your brand, it really, you have to learn fast, or you need to put people in that position who have experience in retail, managing people, managing the employees, scheduling, customer service. That's where the curve really starts to get steep. And it just, it was steep for me because I'm not very good at those things. So I had to learn fast by myself and then eventually slot people in who are much more capable to handle those things. But I will tell you that, just selling is not a steep learning curve. Make something and then just sell it. Find some friends to give it to at first to get some feedback, and then just see if you can sell one and work from there. That is not a steep learning curve. But as you progress and things start to scale up, then I would say that learning curve gets a little bit steeper. And it's not, yeah, I'll leave it at that. Prof Beans, could you touch on the gross profit of the products you stock? Now, I can't disclose my gross profit margin on my products in numbers, but I can tell you that the products that have the lowest margin are anything made at the factory. The factory has a lot of employees. It's got salaried employees. It's got hourly employees. It's got a big rent. It has a lot of equipment that have lease payments. It has a ton of inventory on the shelves. We have to make the product there, and then we have to get it over to the scoop shop, which costs diesel, and then we have to lease a reefer, a refrigerated truck. So pints, ice cream sandwiches, tubs. These are all things that, because they're made off-site in a separate factory, have a very low gross profit margin compared to, say, soft serve, for example. Soft serve is tremendous. It provides all of the margin that our other products do not. It balances things out. Because for soft serve, we have our mix. We have one expense to bring it to the shop, which is to get it from the dairy, which I do, or we have sometimes a freight company do. Bring it to the shop, we pour it, we flavor it, pour it in the machine, press go, and then we have soft serve. There's really no labor involved in that, so that has a much higher gross profit. 3 more. Joe Pev, will you ever bring back Boku? It's interesting. So Boku is the underground restaurant that I ran, the supper club, prior to getting into ice cream. And I was having this conversation with somebody that I met up in Livingston Manor, a business owner up there. And, it's one of those things that I would love to bring back, because in my mind, it's extremely romantic and it was a lot of fun. But it's also something that I know should just be left where it is, because it had its moment. It did extremely well. It was, I think, in a time where it made sense. The space was perfect for it. It was just a confluence of so many things that was just great. And it ended on a really high note. It didn't end because it wasn't doing well. It ended like on the upswing. It's just that ice cream took over and was more scalable and could provide me a life where the supper club couldn't, and so I ended it. And that's a great place to leave things. To bring it back, I think would be extremely risky, because, what if it doesn't go well? Then kind of like ruined your legacy. So it's, I think, just best to leave. Let sleeping dogs lie. Pun intended. But I think about it all the time. I think it was a phenomenal concept. I think it could be done again. But, my heart and my focus is in ice cream right now. So it's just not something that I have the bandwidth for. But I do think about it. It's a great question. Steve Derive. Option to purchase a double serving of soft serve to fill up waffle cones. This is kind of a specific question. Yeah, we could do that, but I like how everything is just one size. So it's the same amount of soft serve. It's easy for us to price. You're just selecting the cone. If you want more soft serve, maybe get a brick and then pay for a cone on the side. But that's what I'm going to say about that. Drew Mahal, last question. Idea of adding chocolate to the bottom tip of waffle cones like Drumsticks have. I think that'd be sick. I mean, that would be awesome. Drumsticks are cool, and I like that little last part. After you've eaten all your ice cream and then you've worked through just cone, then you have this thing at the end to sign you off. A little extra is great, but it doesn't work in scale. The reason why is because we go through cases, and a case has 144 waffle cones in it. We go through cases a night of waffle cones. So for us to somehow fill the waffle cones with chocolate and then get them cold so that it solidifies and then have them somewhere and they don't stack well, because now you've taken the bottom tip away and then the next tip can't nest in there. It would just be an absolute nightmare. The other thing is how do you get that hard shell, how do you get that chocolate to harden? Somehow you have to cool it. We do not have any more space for cooling things in our shops. We are dedicating all of that space to holding mix, inclusions. So it's a cool idea, but it doesn't really work well for us. Okay, guys, that was episode 5. It's great to be back. See you next time. Goodbye.